The rain had just stopped when Michael Barrett noticed them. He was crouched on the wet sidewalk outside Parker's grocery, tying his 7-year-old son, Jake's shoelace for what felt like the 100th time that week. The autumn air smelled clean and fresh, the way it does after a good rain in the city. Michael had just finished his shift at the construction site, and all he wanted was to grab a few things for dinner and get home. That's when he saw the two little girls. They couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Identical twins with blonde curls pulled into matching pigtails, wearing red dresses that looked freshly pressed despite the damp weather. They stood perfectly still on the sidewalk, their small hands touching their chests in the same gesture over and over. Their blue eyes were wide, searching the faces of everyone who passed by. Michael watched as person after person hurried past them. A businessman with an umbrella, a young couple absorbed in their phones, an elderly woman with a shopping cart. Everyone seemed to look right through those two little girls, as if they weren't even there. "Dad, what are they doing?" Jake asked, following his father's gaze. Michael recognized the gesture immediately. His heart squeezed in his chest. Those girls were signing. They were deaf, and they were asking for help. 3 years ago, Michael's world had fallen apart when his wife, Sarah, passed away suddenly. She'd been the light in their home, the one who knew how to handle everything with grace and warmth. After she was gone, Michael had to learn how to be both mother and father to Jake. It wasn't easy, but grief has a way of teaching you things you never thought you'd need to know. One of those things was sign language. Jake had a deaf student in his kindergarten class, and Sarah had started learning to sign so she could communicate with the boys' parents at school events. After she died, Michael kept up with the lessons. It felt like holding on to a piece of her. Plus, Jake loved learning it too. They'd practice together at bedtime, their own secret language in the quiet of their small apartment. Michael stood up slowly, his knees protesting after a long day of work. He was 38, though some days he felt twice that. His dark hair was starting to show gray at the temples, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who'd spent years working outdoors. But his eyes were kind, the sort of warm brown that put people at ease. He walked over to the twins, Jake following close behind. Michael knelt down to their level, the damp sidewalk soaking through his jeans. He raised his hand and signed, slowly and clearly, "Hello, I'm Michael. Are you lost?" The change in those little girls was instant and beautiful. Their faces lit up like someone had turned on a switch. Their small bodies, which had been so tense and frightened, relaxed. One of them started signing rapidly, her tiny hands flying. The other reached out and grabbed Michael's sleeve, as if afraid he might disappear like everyone else had. Michael's signing wasn't perfect, but he understood enough. The girls were Emma and Ella Davies. They'd been with their grandmother at the store, but somehow they'd gotten separated. They'd been standing outside for almost 20 minutes, trying to get someone's attention, but nobody had stopped. Nobody had understood. "It's okay now," Michael signed, offering them both a reassuring smile. "We'll find your grandmother. You're safe." Jake, watching his father sign, tugged on Michael's shirt. "Can I help, Dad?" Michael nodded and showed Jake how to sign, "Don't worry," and "We're here." Jake repeated the signs carefully, and the twins' smiles grew even wider. Just then, a woman came rushing out of the grocery store. She was in her early 60s, well-dressed in a beige suit, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the earlier rain. Her face was pale with worry until she spotted the twins. "Emma! Ella!" she cried out, hurrying toward them. But the girls, focused on Michael and Jake, didn't hear her approach. Michael stood and gently touched the twins' shoulders to get their attention, then pointed toward the woman. The moment they saw her, both girls ran into her arms. The woman, their grandmother, Christine Davies, held them tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. When she looked up at Michael, her gratitude was overwhelming. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you so much." I only turned away for a second to reach for something on a high shelf, and when I looked back, they were gone. "I've been searching everywhere." She paused, seeming to notice something. You know sign language?" Michael nodded. "Some, enough." Christine's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these seemed different somehow, softer. "No one stopped," she said quietly. All those people walking by and no one stopped. They must have thought the girls were just playing some game. They stopped looking after a while, Michael said gently. I think they were starting to get scared. Christine knelt down and pulled the twins close again. She looked up at Michael with an expression he would remember for the rest of his life. It wasn't just gratitude, it was recognition. The recognition that someone had seen. Her granddaughters, not as strange or difficult, but as children who needed help. How can I ever thank you? She asked. Michael smiled. You just did. But Christine Davies was not the type of woman to let a kindness go unacknowledged. Over the next few weeks, she made it her mission to get to know Michael and Jake better. She learned that Michael worked long hours in construction, often struggling to balance work with being a single parent. She learned that Jake was a bright, curious boy who loved books and animals. And she learned that Michael, for all his quiet strength, was lonely. Christine, as it turned out, was a retired teacher who now volunteered at the city's Deaf Community Center. She invited Michael and Jake to visit, to meet other families, to see the programs they offered. Michael hesitated at first. He wasn't much for social gatherings. But something in Christine's warm insistence reminded him of his late wife, and he couldn't say no. The first visit changed something in Michael. Watching Jake play with Emma and Ella, seeing how effortlessly the children communicated despite their different worlds, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For 3 years, he'd been carrying grief like a heavy stone. But here, surrounded by laughter and flying hands and genuine human connection, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Christine became a fixture in their lives after that. She'd invite them over for Sunday dinners, where Emma and Ella would teach Jake new signs, and Michael would tell stories from his construction sites that made everyone laugh. Sometimes, late in the evening after the children had fallen asleep watching a movie, Christine and Michael would sit in her kitchen, drinking coffee and talking about life. You know, Christine said one evening, her hands wrapped around her mug, I was so angry that day. Angry at all those people who walked past my granddaughters without seeing them. But then I realized something. What's that? Michael asked. Most people don't know how to see what they haven't learned to look for. You saw them because you'd learned to look, because you'd taken the time to learn their language. She paused. That's what kindness really is, isn't it? Taking the time to learn someone else's language, whatever that language might be. Michael thought about that for a long time. He thought about Sarah, and how she'd taught him that love means learning what someone needs, learning how they communicate, learning to see the world through their eyes. He thought about those 2 little girls on the sidewalk, and how terrifying it must have been to feel invisible in a crowd of people. And he thought about Jake, growing up in a world that could be so busy, so distracted, so quick to look past someone who seemed different. 6 months after that rainy day, Michael stood in Christine's backyard, watching Jake play with Emma and Ella, and a dozen other children from the Deaf Community Center. There was a birthday party happening, Emma and Ella's 5th birthday, and the yard was filled with balloons and laughter, and hands moving in conversation. Christine came to stand beside him. You know what I love most about this? She said. Look at those kids. They don't see differences. They don't see obstacles. They just see friends. Michael nodded, his throat tight with emotion. That's what we used to be like, Christine continued, before life made us complicated. Before we learned to rush past each other, to look at our phones instead of people's faces. She turned to Michael. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for reminding me that there are still people in this world who take the time to see. Michael smiled, watching his son laugh at something Emma was signing. I should be thanking you, he said. You and your granddaughters have given us something we didn't know we needed. You've given us a family again. And in that moment, standing in a backyard full of children who spoke with their hands and their hearts, Michael understood something profound. The day he'd stopped for those 2 little girls on a wet sidewalk, he hadn't just helped them. They had helped him. They'd reminded him that the world is full of people who are waiting to be seen, to be understood, to be met where they are, and that the simplest act of kindness, taking a moment to learn someone's language, to meet them in their world, can change everything. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light across the yard, Jake ran up to his father, his hands moving excitedly in the signs he'd learned. Dad, can Emma and Ella come over next weekend? We want to teach you more signs. Michael knelt down and signed back. I would love that. Because sometimes the most beautiful conversations are the ones we have without words. And sometimes the most profound connections are made not when we speak, but when we take the time to listen with our eyes and respond with our hearts. That rainy evening in autumn had taught Michael a lesson he would carry forever. Everyone is speaking. We just have to learn to listen.